We've looked at how it is that we can get spiritually fit. And I want to take us through this process of just recalibrating our hearts and our minds to tune into the things of the Lord and to maybe begin some new habits so that we can have greater health spiritually for the road ahead. About 14 years ago in January, I noticed in the course of a couple of weeks that my heart was racing a lot and I was getting palpitations. And I realized that my heart was having a hard time getting into rhythm. And I had been very busy doing a lot of stuff and not thinking about my health or anything like that. And as I was going through that experience, I didn't even really know what arrhythmia was, but I could tell that my heart wasn't doing what it wanted to do. Now, I know what you're thinking. You probably said you should have gone to the emergency room or something like that when that happened. But I don't like doctors. I don't like hospitals. Now, I love to visit people in the hospital, but I don't want to be that guy in the hospital bed. So I thought, I'm going to work this out on my own. I'm going to figure out what it is that I need to do to get things settled down. Well, after about a month, it kind of calmed down, and I thought, well, okay, I got that under control. Well, next January, same thing over again. And I'm like, well, for some reason my heart's getting out of rhythm. I don't want to tell anybody. I don't want anybody to panic. I certainly don't want to go to the hospital. What do I do about it? Well, I looked up online what it is that you can do about it, and I realized that there is medicine that can treat that. There is surgery that can treat that. And did you know there are some other options if you have heart arrhythmia that you can do, and I'll just share what they are. And maybe if you have that issue, if you're having palpitations, slow heartbeat, irregular heartbeat, feeling pauses between heartbeats, anxiety, weakness, dizziness, you know the drill. If you have all of that, there is actually a nerve somewhere in your body that can control the heart rate. And it's called the vagus nerve. And if you want that thing to put things back into place without a pacemaker or medicine, you can do it this way. It says you can do it by gagging, by holding your breath and bearing down, by immersing your face in cold water, by coughing, by putting your fingers on your eyelids and pressing down gently. And as I'm going through this list, I'm thinking, really? There's got to be a better way to deal with this arrhythmia than these exotic and bizarre behaviors than medicine and certainly surgery. Well, over time I realized that the issue isn't so much how you react to that, but what you change in your life to be able to not have that in the first place. And what I decided to do was some simple things like get some rest and eat a little better and probably do a little bit more exercise. And it was funny how when I changed those habits, that stuff went away. And I think sometimes as believers, we get into this mode where we're just out of whack. And maybe we go to some extremes to try to get our spiritual life and our personal life, our emotional life back in order. But I think what God wants to do over the long haul is to just help us to recalibrate these things relative to who He is in our life and how He can guide us through it. Now, in the image up there, you'll see a little band. Does anybody know what that band is? It's a Fitbit. Does anybody have a Fitbit in here? There's a few of you. They say that 35% of millennials, that is people born between 1980 and 2000, are going to be wearing them this year. 35% are going to have this little band on their arm because they know that their lifestyle is different than generations before. The portions that they eat now are larger. A bagel is twice as big now as it was 25 years ago. And a lot of time spent looking at a monitor. And they're finding that they're having issues with obesity, arrhythmia, all these things. And a lot of them are waking up to that and realize, if I'm going to live this life for a long duration, I've got to do something. And so the Fitbit was some entrepreneur's response to a situation that was emerging. And it's a way for people to calibrate what their heart rate is over the course of a day or a week or a month, and they can graph that if you like to do that. They can have competitions on who can keep their heart rate at the best place, or it also tracks what you eat. And I wasn't aware of this, but did you know that the government recommends that you walk 10,000 steps every day? Everybody's shaking their head. Yeah, we knew that. Where you been? I didn't know that, so I'm the last one on the boat there. So I have no idea how many steps I'm walking, and I have to be honest with you, I was given a Fitbit for Christmas last year. And you'll notice that I don't have it, and I haven't gotten into the habit of wearing it. And part of me says, I'm not that worried about it because I've put some things into my life, habits into my life where I feel okay about my health. I exercise, I eat right, I take Geritol and one a day, and Doan's pill for my back. You remember those? No, I don't do any of that stuff, but I do try to take care of my body. And what I realize is that all of us need help in different areas of our lives to stay healthy and to keep our minds and our hearts where they need to be so they don't go off the reservation like my heart rate did some time ago. And maybe your spiritual life isn't in rhythm right now. It's kind of hit and it's kind of miss, and you kind of have fits and you kind of have starts on that. And what I'd like to do today is not burden you with a whole bunch of stuff that says, okay, I gotta just completely retool my whole life, and it starts now. But rather just redirect you on a path that will enable you to look at life perhaps in a way that doesn't overwhelm you, but at the same time helps you to be in that place that you need to be while you live life here on earth. Now, if you notice the Fitbit that is on the image, what does it say on there? God first. And I think if we get that, we actually are well on our way. But if you're like me, sometimes you read that and you're saying, well, I'm not sure how to do that. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. So if you have your message notes with you, in the front of the notes, there's a couple of quotes from the Bible. And the first one is taken from Matthew. And I'm actually going to read a little bit more than what you have in front of you. And these are the words that Jesus wrote. He had actually just told a lot of people off, believe it or not, made them pretty angry because they were trying to portray God in ways that really weren't very accurate. And so Jesus, the scripture says in Matthew 11:25, abruptly broke into prayer. And he said, thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. You've concealed your ways from sophisticates and know-it-alls, but spelled them out clearly to ordinary people. Yes, Father, that's the way you like to work. And Jesus resumed talking to the people, but now tenderly he said, the Father has given me all these things to do and say. This is a unique father-son operation coming out of father and son intimacies and knowledge. No one knows the Son the way the Father does, nor the Father the way the Son does. But I'm not keeping it to myself. I'm ready to go over it line by line with anyone willing to listen. And here's the part that I want us to focus on. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. And a little later, Paul wrote this, which corresponds, I think, well with what we just read. And I'd like to read 1 Timothy 4, 7, and 8. Here Paul wrote in another situation, "Have nothing to do with irreverent, silly myths. Rather, train yourself for godliness. For while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come." So let me just tell you a little bit about what's going on in these two scriptures, because I think you can relate. The Jewish people elevated wisdom as perhaps the most important thing you could ever attain. But the only people that could really tap into it were the intelligent people, the scholars, the ones who spent a lot of time discussing and debating and learning about that and coming up with all of these ideas that said, this is how you live a godly life. And they were misdirecting people in such a way that Jesus called them out and he said, you got all these convoluted schemes on how you live a godly life, and they're just wrong. And the one way that you really find a life with God that keeps you spiritually fit and healthy is to recognize it's not about a lot of convoluted information, but about a relationship. A relationship like a father to a son. And I've done enough funerals to see how that relationship works. Because a number of times I've heard sons or daughters get up and talk about, in this case, a father, and they described all of these characteristics about how the father invested in their life in ways that they didn't come to appreciate until much later on. And what they realized was the reason why I am healthy and the reason why I'm equipped and the reason why I can do well in life is because I had a father who took the time to show me these things, and I really benefited from that approach. And what Jesus is saying in this passage of Scripture is we're kind of a father-son operation. People are looking for God. They're looking to get fit in the Lord, but they're looking in all the wrong places. If you really want to know how to get fit in the Lord, to have your spiritual life where it needs to be in a healthy place, look no farther than me. Because what I've learned from Him. And I'm here to show you what He taught me. And it is not weighing you down with the yoke and the burden of the law, which the Pharisees would talk a lot about. Like if you can just memorize all these scriptures, if you can learn about all these teachings about the scriptures, then you'll be in a good spiritual place. And people are feeling like, I don't have the time or the wherewithal to go there. And Jesus said, let's just put that all aside and keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is to stay connected to me as I've stayed connected to the Father. And when you do, you will find yourself refreshed. And I don't know about you, but there are times when I like to just get alone with the Lord in prayer, in reading the Word, in just calibrating my spirit to Him, and then thinking about how I'm going to live my life with Him. It's not real complicated as much as it is just having a conversation with Him, spending a little bit of time reading His Word. And one thing that I like to do is the nerd in me. I have this notebook, and I like to just write notes about what that is, and just stay connected that way. And if you get into the habit of just writing a little bit each day, at least in my case, and for many, that works, you feel like you stay calibrated, you stay fit. I actually spend probably 5 to 7 days a week, at least a half an hour on my stepping machine. And it's just so I can stay fit. My dad had a heart attack whenever he was in his mid-40s. And there was a moment there where I thought maybe I was going to join him. And he had a brother. My dad died at 59. He has a brother, or he's not alive, but his brother is, who was out of shape, not really where he needed to be spiritually or mentally. And in his mid-40s, early 50s, his wife said, "You better change some things or we're not going to be together in the long haul." And so he cut out some bad things. He incorporated some good things, just sort of a slow process. And over time, what happened was he found himself very fit. And whenever I remember him as a kid, he was pretty heavy, and I thought, he won't be around, and his lifestyle wasn't that good. He's not going to be around in 70, 80 years. Well, I had a conversation with my cousin while I was back home. You catch up on all the gossip, and I said, "How's your dad doing?" He said, "Well, he just got done doing a major hike of the Grand Canyon." And I'm doing the math, and I'm like, he's got to be in his early 70s. I said, "How in the world did he do that?" And I guess there's a track you can go all the way through the Grand Canyon. And he said he did it. And I'm like, I'm tired just listening to it. And I said, "Well, how did he do that?" Well, he got on his exercise machine over time, put it at a tilt, put a backpack on, and he did that stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be that fit. But what amazed me was how he just made some gradual, incremental changes. And then all of a sudden, he's a 70-something guy hiking the Grand Canyon. It gave me a little bit of sort of a surge of hope that when I'm in my 70s, I'll still be walking around good and stuff like that. And this is right after I was telling him, I was walking into Home Depot, and I've broken my big toe 3 times in the last couple of years, and it just hurts. And then I did something to my ankle riding dirt bikes a long time ago. And so I'm walking, they're both hurting, and I'm just like shuffling through Home Depot, and I'm thinking, I'm 52 and I'm just shuffling along here. What am I going to be like in 10, 20 years? And then he told me that story about my uncle, and I thought, I wonder if he's ever broken any toes. I wonder how his ankle is. And the funny thing was, he of all of his brothers, he's one of there's 11 kids, and most of the brothers are gone. But he's the one who said, I do have to intentionally take measures to change the course of my action here. And he just gradually moved into that. And when Paul wrote this, as Jesus is telling us to keep him at the center and rest in him, he's suggesting here that just like an athlete trains, there are some things that you and I have to do in order to stay spiritually fit. Perfect attendance at church is one of them. But also, thanks, Jason, that's very helpful. But also, as we're going into this, let's start where maybe we're at. And maybe you have spiritual heart arrhythmia. And if you do, let's take it on a little bit. What are some of the signs that I would imagine that you would see? One is fatigue. That is, spiritual things just have it's almost like your world went from high definition color TV to fuzzy old black and white TV, and spiritually you just feel just sort of bland. And perhaps the place to start is just a little bit of rest. I have to be honest with you, before I went to Illinois, I was feeling that. I just felt like I was just checking things off on my list, and it had no flavor or character to it. It was just things I got to get done. And when I got away and checked out for a while and got rest, I feel like I'm ready to go back into the game again and make a difference for the kingdom. So if you get fatigued, you need rest. On the 7th day, what did God do? Rested. Why did God need to rest? He probably didn't, but he probably did that. Probably said, this is important for you to do, rest. So Sabbath rest could be a day. In some cases, it's a vacation. In other days, and other times, it's a break. If you're starting to feel fatigue, maybe that's a sign that things are getting a little bit out of whack. Secondly, maybe one of your symptoms, as you're looking at that, is indifference. The fatigue means I'm also not that into spiritual things, not really interested in the Bible. I'm not thinking about the Lord, not really talking to Him. Worship is kind of like I could take it or I could leave it. And you get into this place where your spirit just is almost dead inside. And I know many of you who've been walking with the Lord, myself included, from time to time, you feel that. Sometimes what will exacerbate that is if you're taking a medication of some sort that just and perhaps it's a something to do like an antidepressant or something like that. The good thing about those things is that they keep your mind from ruminating too much. But the bad thing about them is because they desensitize your ability to sort of interact with those things that are bothering you. It makes you indifferent about the things that you should care for. And so if you have those medication things going on in your life, think about the relationship that they're having to your spiritual life. Now, I'm not saying stop taking them, but I'm just saying that they can contribute to that numbness of your spiritual life. And you're thinking, my life just doesn't have what I need. And I can assure you, a lot of people have written about that. And then finally, spiritual arrhythmia can happen from just inconsistent spiritual habits. Now, I have routines, and I suspect many of you have routines. Did you guys do the same thing today when you got up that you do every day? Pretty much? Okay. I did with one exception. Christian had a bunch of kids over last night, and all the cars were not parked where they needed to be parked in the yard and stuff like that. So I had to move that around, but other than that, it was pretty much the same routine. And even to the point of the dog saying at a particular point in the routine, I have to go to the bathroom. And so it's like clockwork. And habits are things that we don't have to think about, but they keep our lives going. And they're important. So you make your habits, and then your habits start to make you. And if you don't have habits in your life that consistently engage you with God's Word, engage you with prayer, and I would say just as importantly, engage you with other Christians, then you're going to feel that arrhythmia. You're going to be a little bit not quite where you need to be in your heart rhythm with the Lord. But here's some things that you can do. So let's look at this a little more positively. One is, we can release unrealistic expectations. Now, you may say, I'm going to get spiritual. I'm going to come to church. I'm going to sign up to serve everything that is out there to serve. I'm going to have an awesome prayer life. I'm going to read 20 books this year. I'm going to do just X, Y, and Z. And you're making your very long list. Have you ever done that before? What happens? Pretty soon, you're like, I don't know if I can do this. One time when I was first starting out in track, they needed somebody to run the 440, which I wasn't my expertise. And they said, somebody's not here, you need to run the 440. So I get out there and I'm sprinting out of the blocks. Way ahead of everybody. And then guess where I finished? Last. Like, is this race over yet? Where's that last guy at? So, unrealistic expectations. You don't just take it all at once. Secondly, as we move into our lives together, what are spiritual opportunities? One is like clockwork. It is at 8:45 every Sunday and 11 o'clock. And as you participate in that, believe it or not, sandwiched between those two times that are consistent are Sunday school classes and growth groups. And those are spiritual opportunities right there. But there are other spiritual opportunities that maybe God is saying, I'm giving you this little window of time each morning when you're drinking your coffee or you're eating your oatmeal. Open up the Bible and read one paragraph and just talk to me afterwards. It's a spiritual opportunity. Another one is while you're driving down the road. When I drive between my house and the church, 7 minutes, I usually take the back road. And when I get on Egypt Road, I usually start praying. First of all, God help me not to hit any deer or any other varmints that are normally on that road. And then secondly, I just start thinking about people and prayer concerns that have come up. And I use that opportunity to pray for other people. Now, the people that are in our church whose houses I drive by, I pray for them as I'm going by. Now, maybe I need to change my route and go by your house. I'll find out how you're doing. And you're like, oh, that person's really struggling. Okay, I've got to now change my route. But it's a spiritual opportunity, and I'm just looking for ways for God to speak to me. Another spiritual opportunity is if you're driving a lot, and if you have an iPhone, for example, there are podcasts that have all kinds of Christian stuff on there. And it's real easy. You just find them and click on them. If you don't have that, then you probably have a tape player. Now, if you have an 8-track tape player, I can't help you out. Or you have a CD player. There's plenty of stuff available, including sermons from First Christian Church. So, if you're like, I heard that sermon once, and I'd love to hear it again. Or I heard that sermon once, and never again would be too soon. So you decide, but all these things are things that God's put into your world, and He says, leverage that so that I can come into your world. And some of you do that, I know. And here's the third thing. Anticipate what's next. Because our Christian life is not just about resting in the Lord, which is important, because that recharges our spirit. But it is also looking out and seeing where there are opportunities for us to make a difference in another person's life. And my guess is in the course of a week, God has directed a handful of people your way. And if you're alert, you're asking yourself the question, what's going on in their life? And maybe I read something just this morning that I could share. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened. And so it's just a way for you and I to come alive in our spirit in the Lord through some pretty easy practices. And maybe at this point in the message, if you're taking notes, you might write on point number 2 and number 3, ways of connecting with the Lord, like we just mentioned. Times a day when you can pray, times a day when you can read, times a day when you can have conversation. And anticipating what's next, maybe you can write, look for 4 people this week that I can be used by the Lord to say something that I just read or heard from the Bible or from a preacher. And you'd be surprised the number of times that I've heard people say, yeah, I was doing this and a Christian came and they said some things to me, and wow, that was just what I needed at just the right time. Isn't that cool? And then as we just round the corner here in our message time this morning, we can establish healthy heart rhythms by starting simply. Don't think that you're going to do it all in one moment, but maybe this week and the next, just find 1 or 2 things and begin to do them. And do you know how long it takes to develop a habit? Anybody? I guess it depends on what it is, but usually about 30, 40 days. you're starting to kind of tune into that, and that becomes second nature. Start simply, not going to overwhelm you. Read a little bit of the Bible. Buy an inspirational book and read a chapter a day. No more. And maybe get one of those books that's by Sarah Young, Jesus Calling, or something like that. Read a little snippet a day. Just start simply and let it grow. Secondly, build slowly. Pace yourself. Just think, I can only imagine Leonard at 90 pounds, 7th grade, running track, and passing out on the 4th lap because he just didn't pace himself. Well, it was fine after they hauled me off on a stretcher. And 2 weeks in the hospital. No, that didn't happen. I'm just making that up. But it does say something about pacing yourself, right? So, perfect attendance. Hey, come to church. Pace yourself. Just do it once a week. Maybe you could step it up as time goes on, but once a week, easy, pace yourself. Okay, thirdly, and this is it, prune often. Anything healthy gets pruned. How many of you, this is funny, I told my wife, I said, kids are moving out, let's get rid of some of our junk. And she said, that's a great idea, which I was shocked. But it starts with my junk first, I guess. But I had a number of conversations with people who said, yeah, we're downsizing too. And I don't know if that's just part of what you have to say, but I got a feeling people realize a cluttered life means that's just more stuff I've got to manage. You prune your life, your energy goes into just a few places. Maybe there's some things right now you need to prune out of your life to make that happen. Maybe it's some habits that you've had that you're taking a balcony view for just a minute and you're saying, yeah, that's not serving me so well. I need to probably redirect my time and my energy. Prune it out. Maybe the one thing you need to prune out is a little bit more dramatic. And that is what we all have to do. Putting God first and ourselves second. Making God more of Him and less of me. But we find as we do, we're very healthy. And that pruning, as radical as it is, starts with putting God first. And I wonder, is God first in your life? Because what a wonderful 2016 it would be if every person at First Christian Church said with all sincerity, God is number one in my life. And what a difference it would make in our lives, in our church, in our relationship with other people. As we come to our time of invitation, my invitation to you is to just begin this journey of making changes. Slow, steady, consistently, but in every turn, keeping Jesus at the center. I read up on the Fitbit and all this stuff, all this data, all these things you got to do. Honestly, I was just overwhelmed. And, now Jason knows I can drill down into theology all day long, but when it comes to other stuff, I get overwhelmed really, really quick. And for me, I just like to keep it simple. God, if my heart's not working right, just help me out. And that was, at the end of the day, what I prayed 13 years ago. And God just started showing me stuff that I needed to change. And I've been pretty healthy since that point. But it begins with Him.